Alright guys, we're going to do a really brief lecture called cell parts, and I want to start with just really three main cell parts. The first one is what we call the plasma membrane or the cell membrane. So what you're looking at here is a picture. If you follow my mouse, this is the outside of the cell. This is the actual membrane, almost like the latex of a balloon, right? And then this is inside of the cell. So this is what we refer to as the plasma membrane. We're going to look at a lot of details with this through class, but you'll notice that, and we're going to look at this in detail as well. These little things are almost like little heads with two little legs coming down off of them, and they're all over the place. And then there's a bunch of upside down ones. It's called a phospholipid bilayer. We're going to learn about that in class with more detail. What you should know now, though, is this is what separates the inside of the cell from the outside of the cell. There's some things embedded and stuck in there that allow movement in and out of the cell. But like I said, we're going to go into more detail on that inside of class with a project you guys will be working on. I just want to kind of solidify a couple of terms. When I talk about the plasma membrane or the cell membrane, I'm talking about the essentially the skin of the cell in a way. Okay. The next one is the cytoplasm. So here I have a cell. This is an amoeba. There's a cell membrane, right, or the plasma membrane. The cytoplasm is all the goop inside, all right? And this, I'm going to play this little clip, 30 seconds, of an amoeba going through something called cytoplasmic, it's cytoplasm, is allowing it to move. It's called cytoplasmic streaming. And you can see the way an amoeba moves is just by kind of molding that slimy cytoplasmic membrane out. And if this was a piece of food right here, this would eventually come around it and trap it, and that's how amoeba eat. So we got some cytoplasmic streaming here. Alright? So we have the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, and the nucleus. Right? So here's a bunch of cells, and there's a nucleus. Here's a nucleus over here. There's a nucleus over here. Inside the nucleus is where all of your DNA is, a very important part of the cell. And you know, probably in most cells that we look at, the nucleus is the one organelle that we can see most often. So I just threw a new term out at you, organelle. An organelle are all of the pieces and parts, almost like the organs, like you have a stomach, a heart. It's the parts inside of a cell. So the nucleus is an organelle, and you're going to learn about a bunch of other organelles that do different jobs. But the nucleus is a very important one. Alright, so those are the three main parts I want you to know. Now, here's another thing. There's a lot of information going on here on this slide. There's two different types of cells, prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Let's start talking about the prokaryotic. Karyotic, literally translates into kernel. The kernel they're talking about here isn't a popcorn kernel, it's the nucleus. They're referring to it as a kernel. Pro means before, kind of like the word pre. So some cells are cells that are so ancient that they evolved before the nucleus was even really invented inside of a cell. So all the DNA is not enclosed in a nucleus. It's before a nucleus. So prokaryotic. The only prokaryotic cells out there are those that belong to bacteria. They tend to be extremely small, especially compared to eukaryotic cells, which are what we have. And the main thing that I want you to know is they lack the nuclear membrane that holds in the nucleus, essentially, that holds everything in. It's lacking all of those membranes around organelles. On the other hand, eukaryotic cells, which is what you are made of, you means new, so it's the newer, in terms of evolution, the newer cells that have a nuclear membrane, a nucleus, that all the DNA is trapped inside of, and all these other organelles that we're going to learn about have nuclear membranes around them. So they have membrane-bound organelles, including a nucleus. These belong to the animal kingdom, so we are made up of eukaryotic cells. Think of eukaryotic, Y-O-U, that's what you have. But so aren't plants, fungi, protists, which are like that amoeba we saw in a previous slide, and they're all made of eukaryotic cells. And these tend to be much larger in size than the prokaryotic cells. So that's where I'm going to stop, and we're going to start talking about a project in class that is going to help guide you guys into learning what each of these other organelles are especially within a eukaryotic cell, which is much more complex than a prokaryotic cell. We'll talk about that in class.